Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lukhaup, and today I would like to talk about the colors of our aquarium fish and how important it is that the fish look pretty, like in full color, that they are agile, that they are healthy. And for me as a photographer, and some of you may know that, I photograph fish, I film them a lot, I work with them, so for me it is very important that my fish always are in a good shape, that they look good, that they are ready to be models and be photographed, and also that they feel well. In fact, this is priority. So I decided that there is in fact 6 factors that are important to have your fish in a good color. So this is my personal opinion and my experience for more than 30 years that I work with fish, and also of course crayfish, other invertebrates like shrimp, snails and so on. But fish, when it comes to photographing, I think fish is the biggest challenge. So over the years I learned what is important to have or to offer the fish, that they look the best way possible. On my live talk a couple of days ago with Aquarium Co-op and Corey and Senzo, we talked about the culture of fish keeping, and in the US it's different from Europe, it's different from Asia, and Asia is different from South America or Australia or the rest of the world. So when it comes to fish keeping, I also observed that in some countries, it's not a total generalization about that, but I could see that there's differences how people keep their fish. If we look at Africa, for example, it's totally different from Europe or the US or even Asia. So animal welfare is not very high valued in every country. So I think that here in Europe we set the standards very high. If you compare it to the rest of the world, US in some places as well, Asia, Japan also in some places, but in other places not that much. Maybe South America, I've been there, I lived even in some places. I visited 85 countries, and usually I also go to pet shops, so I think I have a very good overview about the fish keeping cultures. And also you can see differences of the colors of fish in these places. When I look at neons, for example, or other fish that are cosmopolitan fish, I can see differences because I can see how the people keep them, how they feed them, the lights, the soils or the gravels, etc. There's many criteria for that, and so today I will talk about what I think is necessary to offer these fish. If it comes to scientific studies or works, there's not too much out there in the scientific world that is busy with the colorations of, or the colors of pet fish. There is some, very few, usually paid by the fish industry in Taiwan, in Indonesia. It's the places where they grow fish, and they pay because they know that if the wholesalers or the industry that grows them and breeds them in Asia sells more, they are happy. So there's a few studies, and you will see that it's not only the food like the industry wants to tell us. Usually you see advertisings that it's the food that is the most important for the color of the fish. I agree that food is important, but I think there's other factors that are as much as important as the food, maybe even more important. And you also know that, like in many of my videos, I will take you also to nature, because during the last 30 years I visited so many places with fish and vertebrates and so on. So I look at the habitats to see what is going on there, and it's not that I only look at the habitat underwater, I also look above water, because that also has an effect on the fish. If there's a lot of trees around, if there's no trees and so on, a lot of water plants on the sides, on the banks. So I look at the whole picture, and then I can see, okay, this is like that, or this is like that, and that's why the fish are colored here and not in this place. And here, for example, this is a place in Florida, and here we can see several species of sunfish from the genus Lepomis. And if you look at them, they look transparent or white or very unobtrusive. That means that they try to melt with the ground, so because they're predators in these waters, alligators, other things, that birds that could catch them, so they also don't have too many possibilities to hide here. It's a very open space, so that's why the fish try to adapt. And this is a very good example of the ground. If the ground is too white, too much light reflecting from the bottom, the fish will not feel very well. And here the same Lepomis sunfish with spaces to hide, grass, nothing is reflecting from the ground or not direct, and here the fish has a total different color. In the aquarium hobby, we have about 1,500 species that are regularly bred. And from this 1,500 species, just 20% are marine and the rest is freshwater fish. In 2017, some scientists published studies about some couple of aquarium fish that they kept on a white substrate or light substrate, like here, sand for example, and they found out that these fish have been much more aggressive than the same species kept on a darker ground. And if we stay with these fish here, this is Sphenochromis freyeri, it's from Lake Malawi, or we have also some from Tanganyika, and if we look at the habitat, we will see, or what I have seen from videos, I have not been snorkeling in the lake or diving, but I have seen many videos, and usually the substrate there is very light and it's open space, so there is spaces to hide, but the sand there, like in Tanganyika or Malawi, is very light, and maybe that's why Malawi cichlids are so aggressive, and also other cichlids that I have observed in nature usually was a lighter ground from white to brownish, cream beige, so these colors. So maybe this is a reason why these fish are so aggressive. The studies, of course, have not been made with all the species, but with some. We cannot transfer this to all of the fish species, but I would say to a very big part, yes. And another study was also made with the background, and they found out that, for example, a blue background like this has a very positive effect on fish. They change behavior, they are much more relaxed, so the combination of dark gravel or dark substrate with blue background, it seems that this is the best according to the scientists, and I agree. Of course, there is cave fish like this one, they don't care, but in general I would say the background and the substrate is my number one point when it comes to start setting up a photo aquarium or setting up a nice aquarium for fish so I can film them and photograph them. We know very well that fish communicate through colors, and an interesting study from an Austrian scientist also says that even black fish look colorful for their tank mates. So black is not just black, it has many shades, many different colors for the fish. When it comes to the substrate that I use, I have usually soil. In most, I would say in 95% of my aquariums I have soil. And for this might sound a little bit difficult because some people will tell me, okay, soil is not good for every fish, but after 1 or 2 years in an aquarium, usually the soil don't buffer that much and I can recycle the soil for fish that like a higher pH, because usually the soil brings the pH down to 6.4, 6.0. So after 1, 2, 3 years, the soil is expired, and I can use the soil for fish like Danio margaritatus or other species that like to have a higher pH. So no problem then for these fish with the same soil. So I use mainly this darker natural soil, not only because it looks good, but also because the plants are growing much better in soil. This is my experience. The second point, and very important in my view, is the plants in an aquarium. Most of my aquariums, I would say 99%, have a dense plant growing, not all over the aquarium, but I would say probably half. So there is open space for that the fish can swim, but there is a big space also where the fish can retreat. And I use usually natural deco. I have no plastic stuff in my aquariums, usually roots or rocks, and a lot of plant growing. I had an experience with, for example, I made a test with several nano fish. One was Danio margaritatus, and this fish, for example, in an aquarium that had nearly no plants, an iwagumi like this one, it had plants on the bottom and a little bit on the rocks like here, and the fish didn't feel well at all. I have not seen them. They were hiding all the time in the plants, and then I decided to change them to another aquarium with a dense plant growing, a little bit of open space, and I could feed them from my hands in 2 weeks, and that is the difference. And here we see the Danio margaritatus. So with all of the nano fish that I kept, this is my experience, because I really did the test for half a year to keep them in an iwagumi, or an aquarium that has a lot of open space, in fact just plants on the bottom, and in aquariums that had denser plant growing, and the difference is immense in my view. There's a very big difference. Boraras, the 6 species that I have, all the same. With an aquarium with hiding places, they look much better than in iwagumi aquarium, an aquarium with rocks or just plants on the ground. So this is my experience. So I would value the plants hiding places, the Aquarium Deco. That would be my number 2. Soil number 1, and then the Deco number 2. My third point would be the water parameters and stress. So if the fish have stress, there is positive stress and there is negative stress. We also know that from studies, and positive stress sometimes is needed that the fish show great colors. But the negative stress, if the water parameters are not great or not good for the specific fish, if there is too many fish in an aquarium, if the water is too cold, too warm, the parameters are not right from like the hardness, or if the water is not soft enough, if there is bullyfish, for example, and in Malawi we have that very often, but also in smaller species, in nano species we have that, like this guy here from the Tucanos, they are territorial, and even if they are small, people think, well, no problem, but if you observe them, you see that even with nanofish sometimes there is a bullyfish, and of course this has an effect on the colors of the fish as well. Under the factor stress, we can also put strong light. In an aquarium at home, usually the light is on for like 8 to 10 hours, and it's usually the full spectrum, like all the time the same intensity. In nature it's a little bit different. The sun doesn't shine all the time full intensity. In the mornings it starts from one side. At noon, yes, there's like 1 or 2 hours full intensity that hit the creek or the stream or the river directly. Like here, we see in Brazil, this was around noon, and the fish try to hide. They usually don't swim in the full sunlight. Very rarely you see this. Usually here they hide under a tree or logs or in the vegetation on the margins. So fish try to hide during full sunlight. They are not exposed all the time, or they don't like to be exposed to full sunlight. So they are looking for places that are like more in the shade, more darker, and that's the places they feel well. So if you have in the aquarium all the time the full intensity, this could also cause stress to the fish, but also to the plants. We know that as well. For example, some bottom plants, some foreground plants, if they have full intensity of light, the leaves will be much smaller. They will grow, yes, but they will grow in a different form because they also have stress. If it comes to temperature, I think that fish are a bit more flexible. You ever swim in a lake that was warm on the surface, and if you go a couple of feet down or meters down, it could be very cold? So I think that the fish, they can handle that a lot better than other parameters. Another factor that can cause stress to the fish and they will change the color is lack of oxygen. Or for example, if you have too much CO2 in the tank, the fish will react on that as well. Not every fish reacts in the same way. Of course, there's betas, they don't have a big problem if you don't have too much oxygen in the tank. So they will go to the surface and just get some oxygen. They will breathe directly from the surface, but other fish will have a big problem with that. There is many things that can cause stress to the fish. Too much current, too less or not enough current, then the wrong food. Some fish are really specialized on some foods and they require that. So if you don't feed them the right food, they will react also and they have stress as well. But we will come to the foods a little bit later. Colors naturally also play an important role in the choice of partners for fish. Males ready to mate, for example, change their everyday color to a striking mating color to impress females. And me as a photographer, of course I would like to shoot them, to photograph them in the moment they are trying to impress, because usually then they have the best colors. And yes, there are fish that the pet shops or people in the hobby tell us that we need to keep them alone. But the real experts don't keep beta fish, for example, alone. They keep usually one male and 2 or 3 females. Of course, you have to have a lot of hiding places because the males, some males, not every male, but some males are really aggressive and they can kill their partners. Anyway, I would suggest not keep the fish alone. Try to find a solution for them to keep them in a group or at least in pairs. The colors of fish, of course, serve as signals to conspecifics as well. They can change their shape and thus their color with the black, red and yellow chromatophores. If you want to catch a fish or frighten them, they have the so-called fright coloration. For example, if you go to a pet shop, buy a fish, in the aquarium he has one color and you put it in a bag, suddenly he has another color, change the color. This scare coloration is motivation and hormone driven and can signal different things. It can signal that it is annoyed by a rival, which is the so-called anger coloration. When it is attacked, it changes its motivation to avoid attracting attention as much as possible and rather take on the color of its surroundings. This usually makes the fish lighter. Fish communicate with color, and this is an important factor that should be taken into account. I finished the video already and then I thought, wait a minute, this with the blue background, of course it looks familiar to me because I've been in so many habitats that the blue color is something that I always saw when the water was very clear. And in my view, the fish remember that over generations and generations. A lot of rivers, creeks, springs are clear, so of course the fish will feel well with this blue background coloration because they feel at home. Fish only have 4 color cells in their body, so the colors are based on the 4 color cells, the so-called chromatophores. These are the colors black, yellow, red, and white. White is created by the storage of crystals in their skin, which consists of guanine and amino acid. And these crystals reflect the incident light, and thus this area appears white or whitish on its own. Together with the other color cells, all other colors are created, especially the colors with the more metallic sheen up to the silvery sheen, and many fish have this silvery sheen. We know a lot of fish in Europe that we don't have that many colorful fish in Europe, but a lot of fish that have this silvery sheen, and this is how it's created. Last but not least, the point that the industry always emphasizes is the food for ornamental fish. We are always told that it should be high quality food and not cheap stuff. And in fact, the fish food producing industry is right. I also value the good fish food a lot, but it's not my first point in a video about the coloration of fish. So fish food is important, but not as the first step that I would take to create colorful fish like in a natural way. Fish food is definitely an issue, and I'm lucky enough to be able to buy or to get it from a company that sells fish food online. I work for Natureholic and Garnelio, and there we also have a fish food that is called Chris and Ollie's, and Oliver Knott and me could design a fish food after our ideas and natural fish food, so you would indirectly also support us if you order this food. I mean, you can try it out. There's a lot of good fish food out there, but with this food you would support Chris and Ollie's. Also, 2 times in a week I feed live food, sometimes frozen, but most of the time real live food, and in my opinion that's a very big plus when it comes to color of fish. There are 3 main pigments that are responsible for the coloration of the skin in all vertebrates. The first is melanin, which we know from humans, we heard that term before, then pterins and carotenoids. And of these pigments, melanins and pterins can only be synthesized by animals, while carotenoids, pigments, cannot be synthesized by animals. So they must be ingested in a natural or a synthetic form with food to achieve their color pigmentation. It all sounds a little bit complicated, and it's probably complicated. So this is the explanation for that. The natural sources of carotenoids that are widely used to improve coloration in the fish feed production include non-photosynthetic organs of higher plants, microalgae, algae, crustacean byproducts, and who would have thought beetroot? An interesting fact is what the industry tells us, that we as consumers, or we as buyers, we are not consumers, but we buy the fish food for our fish. We like to buy fish food that is based on natural sources and not fish food that is based on synthetic sources. The problem that agriculture companies face is the stabilization of the obtained skin color after the feeding of the fish has stopped. Usually when you stop feeding the fish, they become paler again, and this happens especially when fish come from Southeast Asia, from Indonesia, or even from Taiwan. They arrive in with great colors, and after 3 or 4 weeks they get paler and paler. Well, it's probably better to advance research at the genetic level in order to stabilize the color distribution patterns and improve the sustainability of the colors. So this was my little video about my experience and how I work with the colors of fish. I hope you can take out something for you from this video. And if you want to, you can subscribe. It's not a must, but I would be more than happy if you subscribe. And give me a feedback what you think about this video. And also, I would like to know where you guys come from. It would be great if you put it in the comments where you come from, so I have a better overview of where people are watching my videos. And if necessary, I can do videos in other languages too, like in Spanish, Romanian, and other languages. And thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and you can see that my fish are really in a good shape, in good colors, and I see you in the next video.